The sky stretched wide, empty as parchment, above the man who walked alone. He had no name now, he had left it behind, along with the city, the voices, and the noise of those who claimed to know God yet spoke only in echoes. They argued of doctrines, disputed miracles, and interpreted texts until nothing was sacred but opinion, but the man, the seeker. He wanted something more, not words about God, but God himself. And so he walked into the wilderness. The desert did not greet him. It simply received him with a stillness so pure it frightened him. There was no song, no breeze, no whisper, only the crunch of his own footsteps on cracked earth and the occasional rustle of a lizard darting away. He had brought a scroll, but stopped reading it after the third day. Its words, once full of fire, now felt like embers cooling in his heart. He wanted more than scripture, he wanted encounter. On the seventh day, he knelt under a dying tree and cried out, "Where are you? O Lord, I have left all to find you. Speak to me." There was no reply, only silence, and so he waited. The desert gave way to jagged stone as the seeker climbed into the mountains. Days blurred into nights, and hunger gnawed like a silent beast. But deeper than his physical craving was the ache of an answered prayer. He did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for safety. He asked for one thing only, to hear God's voice. One evening, he reached a narrow ridge beyond which loomed a cave black as forgotten dreams. Something about it drew him, not fear, but gravity, as if the silence within was older than the world itself. He entered. Inside, the dark wrapped around him like a cloak. He waited, kneeling, then laying prostrate on the cold stone floor. He whispered, "Speak, Lord, even one word. Let me know you see me." Nothing. Only the slow dripping of water from the cave's ceiling, countless centuries condensed into sound. He remained for 3 days. The first day he prayed, the second he wept, the third he simply listened. On the third night he heard something not with his ears, but deep in his chest. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a sentence. It was presence, a knowing that he was not alone. He stood, breath trembling, and stepped out of the cave. The stars above seemed to shimmer with new meaning. The same silence remained, but now it hummed, not with answers, with peace. He descended from the mountains and walked for many weeks, his body thin, his eyes clearer than ever before. He came upon a forgotten city. Its walls crumbled, its temples open to wind and ruin. The city had once worshipped many gods of fire and fertility, stone and storm. Their names were etched into shattered columns. Their statues, once towering, now lay face down in dust, and yet the seeker felt drawn to walk its streets as if it had something to teach. Children with hollow eyes watched him from doorways. The people here were not starving for bread but for truth. Priests still performed rituals in broken temples, hoping to summon gods that no longer spoke. One evening, the seeker stood before a crowd gathered around a cracked fountain, where an old man ranted about divine punishment and signs in the stars. The seeker raised his hand. "I have heard the silence of God," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried like thunder. "And it is not empty." They laughed, some threw stones. One woman approached him in secret that night and asked, "What does his silence say?" He paused before answering. "It says, 'Be still and know that I am God.' Not speak, but know. Not see, but trust. Her eyes welled with tears. "I used to hear him," she whispered, "when I was a child, but now nothing." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Perhaps he never stopped speaking. Perhaps we stopped listening. That night he slept beside the broken altar, and in his dream he saw a flame flickering not in the heavens, but in the quiet center of his chest. He left the ruined city at dawn, walking without a clear path. The seeker no longer asked for signs. His feet simply moved toward something deeper than direction toward presence. One morning, after days of quiet travel, he arrived at what seemed like a gate, but there was no wall, no fence. Just a stone arch standing in the middle of an open field, weathered with age, inscribed with symbols he didn't recognize. Beyond the arch lay nothing remarkable, just grass and mist. And yet, when he passed under it, everything changed. The air grew fragrant, heavy with the scent of unseen flowers. The mist shimmered with gold, and though he could not see trees or streams, he felt as though he were walking through a garden older than Eden. He heard no bird song, no water trickling, only the sound of his own breath, and beneath it, a silence deeper than before. Suddenly he stopped. Something within him had shifted. The garden, he realized, wasn't around him, it was within. He closed his eyes. There inside he saw light, not blinding, not loud, but soft, like the last ray of sun before nightfall. It pulsed in stillness, saying nothing yet meaning everything. "You have searched." The light seemed to whisper, though no words formed. "You have waited in silence, and now you are beginning to hear." Tears welled in his eyes. All this time he had searched outward, climbed mountains, entered caves, wandered cities, and all along the voice was not lost. It was quiet, it was waiting. It had been whispering inside him. The mist faded, and the seeker found himself in a barren land once more. But this time he did not feel lost. Still, a question stirred within him, one that could not be silenced by peace alone. Why does God high? As if in response, the ground beneath his feet cracked open, and he stumbled into a narrow corridor of stone. It sloped downward like a birth canal of the earth itself. The walls shimmered faintly, not with light, but with memory. At the corridor's end stood a mirror. It was not made of silver or glass. It was water, perfectly still, suspended upright, shimmering with living silence. The seeker approached. When he looked into the mirror, he did not see his face. He saw every moment he had doubted God. He saw himself shouting into the desert sky. He saw himself weeping in the mountain cave. He saw himself begging for signs and rebuking the silence. He saw the pride of his search, the subtle demand for God to appear on his terms, the fear that had dressed itself in hunger for truth. He fell to his knees, not in shame, but in surrender. "I do not need to understand," he whispered. "I only need to trust." The mirror rippled, and then, for the briefest moment, he saw a face not his own, but ancient and eternal, gazing at him with a love too vast for language. Then it vanished. The corridor crumbled behind him, and he climbed upward toward the light. The seeker emerged into a land he had never seen on any map. It was neither desert nor forest, mountain nor city. It felt untouched, not just by people but by time. There, flowing silently through the land, was a river. It shimmered like moonlight poured over glass, moving without sound, bending through the hills without carving them. The seeker followed it, marveling. He knelt beside the waters, but saw no reflection, only movement, tentless, gentle movement. He looked upstream. No springs fed it. No glaciers melted into it. No rainfall touched it. It had no source. It simply was. And somehow he knew this river was not water. It was presence. It was God, not in image, not in voice, but in being. He followed the river for what felt like days or perhaps minutes or years. Time no longer apply. At one bend he saw a man sitting on the bank. He wore no robes, carried no staff, bore no crown. He was both young and old, plain and radiant. The seeker sat beside him for a while. Neither spoke. Finally the seeker asked, "Are you the one I've been searching for?" The man smiled, not with lips, but with existence itself. "You search for my voice," he said, "but I gave you silence that you might hear deeper. You asked for my face, but I gave you reflection that you might see yourself. You longed for my hand, but I gave you time so your hands would learn to serve." The seeker bowed his head. "Why do you whisper so quietly?" "Because my whisper is always there. Loud voices come and go, but only love can recognize the whisper." The river shimmered brighter. "You thought I was far," the voice continued, "but I have always been within, in the silence between your thoughts, in the stillness behind your striving." The seeker wept not out of sorrow, but out of recognition. The seeker journeyed on, though now every step felt less like travel and more like awakening. The river eventually disappeared into the earth, leaving no trace, no delta, just a hush that echoed in the windless air. He climbed a hill so gentle it felt like a thought. At the top he stood under a sky more vast than any he had ever seen, clear, still, unmoving. No birds flew, no clouds drifted, not even the breeze stirred, yet something spoke, not through sound, not through form. It was as if the sky itself leaned close, and every breath the seeker took was an answer. You do not need to hear my voice to know my will. You do not need to feel my hand to walk my path. You only need to rest in me. And in that moment, the seeker understood. Faith was not a ladder to climb. It was a surrender, a homecoming. The seeker lay down in the grass, gazing up at the still sky, and for the first time in his life he stopped asking. He simply listened, and in that listening something opened, not in the world, but in his soul. A door, long closed, a veil quietly drawn back, and there he was, not loud, not dramatic, but utterly present, closer than thought, nearer than breath. The seeker rose at dawn, though the sky did not change. It had never been about time. He turned and began walking, not forward, but home. Yet, strangely, every place he passed felt different. The same roads, the same world, but now everything shimmered with meaning. The rocks no longer seemed silent. The trees whispered without wind. Even the spaces between things, the gaps, the pauses were filled with invisible music. When he returned to the village where he had once lived, the people did not recognize him at first. His beard had grown, his eyes were calm, and he no longer spoke like one who demanded truth. He spoke like one who had become it. A child approached him shyly. "Mister, do you know God?" The seeker smiled and knelt beside the boy. "I know his silence," he whispered, "and now I know what it means." The child looked puzzled. "But doesn't silence mean nothing?" The seeker shook his head gently. "No, silence is where God speaks most clearly. We are just too loud to hear him." The villagers began to gather. hoping for teachings, miracles, stories, but he offered only stillness. He would sit by the well and listen when someone wept. He listened when someone rejoiced. He smiled. When someone asked, "Where is God?" he would point not to the heavens, not to a temple, but to their own heart. "He is never left," he would say, "but you must become quiet enough to notice." Years passed. The seeker grew old. One morning, he did not rise. He lay peacefully beneath the same windless sky, eyes closed, hands open. They say a great silence fell over the village that day, and yet it was not an absence. It was a fullness too deep for words, a whisper that needed no sound, the whisper of God.